Hello, everyone, and welcome to DiMe's inaugural Lightning Speed Crowdsourcing event. My name is Rachel Chassie, and I'm the Director of Innovation at DiMe. We have something very exciting today, which came about in response to requests from our DiMe members on ways to connect, pitch new concepts, and engage in problem solving with others in the digital medicine community. And so the Lightning Speed Crowdsourcing event was born as a way for people to share ideas, seek input, and generate new collaborations in our community. So when we say lightning speed, we mean it. Each presenter today will have a total of 8 minutes, a 3-minute presentation, and then a 5-minute open-ended conversation with our audience on the line today. In these 5 minutes, audience members are encouraged to unmute themselves and ask our presenters questions in real time, crowdsourcing a lively discussion. This is a rather strict time frame, and so I'll have to enforce it just to be sure we stay on track today. I'll cue the music like at the Oscars if I have to, but I think we'll be just fine. And then after today's live event, everyone is encouraged to continue the conversation on DiMe's Slack in the Lightning Speed Crowdsourcing channel. All DiMe members have access to Slack, so please reach out if you need assistance locating it. And all DiMe members can jump in on the Slack conversation, including those who weren't able to join us live today. All right, so let's get started. We've got 3 excellent presenters today, and I'll let them introduce themselves during their time. So let's go ahead and get this party started. Bart, we'll kick off with you.
A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I don't know where you guys and girls are on the planet. I'm in Leiden, which is in Holland. Very excited to be here, and I am going to talk a little bit about Q1.6, but more pose a how do you call it, a challenge to see if we can generate some discussion about virtual trials. That's it from my side for now. Oh, sorry, you want me to already?
Sure, yeah, we're getting your 3 minutes started.
Okay, cool. Okay, so what we are doing is we are a software company based in Belgium, and we have developed a rule-based engine which is used today in clinical trials in the area of patient engagement. Yeah, and this rule-based engine is built in such a way that we see compliance rates, engagement rates in patients in clinical trials reaching around % in several cases. So this is for the industry a very novel thing, an eye-opener, and we're trying to find our way into innovation, virtual trials, etc. Yeah. So it consists of a rule-based engine, which you can see here in the center. We are able to link into sensor components on the bottom, and we are able to communicate to any available communication channel. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, and my question to the audience is really the following. When you talk about virtual trials, and me being based in Europe and being a European, we see a lot of conferences happening in the US, where we see a lot of promising startups doing a lot of evangelization. Yeah, they really try to convince the audience that what they have is absolutely gold. Whereas I think in Europe, if I make it very generalistic, is you see a lot of startups and they just do hard work. They are not, they don't maybe have the financial means to show what they're doing, but they are working with the larger and largest healthcare companies out there. And I want to hear the audience say, what's the best approach? That's my teaser. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Yeah, so those are the 3 minutes that that Bart has for presenting. And so now we'll go ahead and start with our 5-minute open-ended questions. So if any questions or comments from the audience, or maybe any other of our panelists, feel free. And while we're waiting on a question, let me punt it back to you, Bart. And so it says, who is wrong on your side? So that's an interesting question. Do you think there's a wrong or a right way, or just different ways?
Now, that's what I want to hear from the audience. You know, it's one thing to be able to stand on the stage and to talk about virtual trials, but yeah, in as I mentioned in Europe, some people decline invitations to talk at conferences because the audience which is coming at the conference is maybe not the relevant one. It's extremely expensive. And maybe the groundwork and the hard work in virtual trials is actually done deep inside companies. And I don't know what's wrong or right, but I just thought, okay, let's pose a question which could generate remarks or people who are angry or people who agree.
All right, I had a question, right? So for virtual trials, if you boil that down, right, there's so many components to that, and my understanding is a lot of the challenge is in the type of wearables. Very little of the biomarkers have been approved to be used as clinical endpoints, so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter if it's top down or bottom up until, like, very early technology innovation issues are solved. Is that the right question to ask?
Maybe. I think you're absolutely right that it's an extremely big, virtual trials is everything. It's a couple of $1 billion industry. So yeah, I mean, your point is valid. A lot of technical issues need to be sorted out. We need to get validation on different digital endpoints. So again, it's hard work. It's a lot of groundwork needs to be done. That's at least I'm convinced of that. That's the case.
Great, thank you. I think we have a question from Colleen Russell.
Yeah, we sure do. So I think there's might be an issue with some unmuting with attendees. So let me see here. Okay, Colleen, I think I've gotten you unmuted. Are you on the line?
I am. Can you hear me?
Sure, just great. Go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. My question was regarding this concept of a minimally viable product. And could it be that there are different approaches to where to draw the line as to when exactly you've achieved a minimally viable product?
Is that a question to me or to the audience?
To you and whomever has an opinion.
Exactly. I mean, let me start briefly. I think a minimum viable product is something a potential customer is willing to spend resources on. Yeah, resources as in time and money. I mean, to do free trials or to do free tests, it will be difficult, at least from an entrepreneurial point of view, to go ahead. But if people want to spend maybe just a couple of $1,000s and time from their organization in looking into what you have built, and if they say, okay, cool, this fits a need and let's continue, for me that would be a minimal viable product. But I'll leave it open to the audience. No audience?
Cindy, I see you've got your hand raised. Did you have a question?
Well, I guess, from a patient perspective, the top down and bottom up, I'm kind of looking at this as you need some external kind of sourcing. So that's where I guess my question would be, and this is kind of just the way I think, but more of a circle or a network rather than just a top down and a bottom up. So it's not really a question, it's a comment.
No, I thought about the patient component as well. And I think I wrote a rather harsh LinkedIn blog post, blog post on LinkedIn about it. Yeah, everybody says patient centricity, but nobody's really able to define what that means. And that's an extremely important question we need to maybe also through the DiMe Society.
All right, Bart. Sorry to cut you off, but that's your 5 minutes, and that's a great segue into bringing the patient voice in. There's a lot of information that we have with DiMe, and Cindy's also a great resource for that. So maybe we can continue and connect offline about that. All right, so now we've got to jump to our next presentation. So that will be right here. All right, so if Michael, your 3 minutes for your presentation are starting now.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I
Sure
unmuted?
can, go ahead.
Okay, great. So thank you everyone for sharing your time. I know that's precious, I appreciate that. My name is Michael Bender. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Intake, where we're automating preventive care to extend global health spans and save lives. Next slide. And so, you know, up to 80% of chronic diseases are thought to be preventable almost exclusively through better diet. Not to mention many conditions are less impactful on both life and cost if we catch them early enough, but there's millions of undiagnosed cases out there. Next slide. So at Intake, we think it's not that difficult. Pretty much prevention and early detection just requires more frequent health checks. You know, what if your car told you you were out of gas a month later? You know, that's we need a reasonable feedback loop that allows us to link our lifestyle choices to the health outcomes, and then to be able to iterate on that and see and feel those changes and improvements. But that doesn't exist today. You know, maybe we go for a preventive checkup once a year to get some of this information. And so it's really hard to improve something you can't measure. Next slide. And so that's why at Intake, we've created a daily health checkup that's completely integrated into your existing routines, so that all of the behavior change can be focused on the important health outcomes and not the data collection required for feedback. Next slide. So our technology has been funded by both the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation. It kind of hangs on your toilet a lot like an air freshener might. When you flush, we biometrically identify you with a fingerprint scanner, and we take a sample directly from the toilet bowl. So you use the bathroom as normal. And then our device with our proprietary biosensors at the device runs diagnostically accurate tests for many different health and diet biomarkers. Next slide. And we're combining that with digital human interventions for feedback. But specifically, as an early stage company, we're focusing on measuring sodium and potassium, even though we could measure potentially thousands of different diet biomarkers. And that's because we want to have a health impact with our device, not necessarily just helping people that are already healthy know that they're really healthy. We're trying to really position this for health impact, right? And so we've connected, next slide.
30 seconds.
With Dr. Bacchus at the American Hypertension Center. And you know, he thinks that our solution will be immediately obvious to many people with hypertension to help them get off of medication or reduce the amount of medication they need. Next slide.
10 seconds.
Okay. And so ultimately, we think we can apply deep learning to sort of identify health conditions before traditional symptoms would arise.
All right, and that's
many
the
years
3
later.
minutes. Okay, lightning speed is, we're serious here with that. Okay,
Yeah.
so fantastic. So we'll go ahead and start the 5-minute conversation if anyone on the line has any questions.
You can go to the next slide also. I've posed a few questions just to see if
We've
anybody
got a
out there.
hand raised. Yeah, we've got a hand raised from Pip Griffin. So are you able to unmute yourself and ask a question? All right, or if you're having a trouble there, you can go ahead and ask in the Q&A panel there, and we'll be sure to get to your question. Okay, while we're waiting, maybe Michael, you can continue with your slide.
Yeah, I wasn't sure about the question part that kind of came up. I didn't realize that was the thing, so I didn't know who would be on the call. I got some questions we have.
Oh, wait a minute, we got another one.
Sure.
Cindy, got your hand raised? Is that you again with a great question?
Yeah, and I can answer the second question. You really need participant engagement before you design your, not just your company, but your product. So my question is did you have any people test this or use this or comment on the design of your apparatus before you went to market with it?
Yeah, we've gotten quite a bit of feedback. We've participated in some, they call it boot camp and ICOR NIH customer discovery processes, where we've been funded to go talk to hundreds different people about how to implement this and what people would want and what they would like. We've been simultaneously developing the technology, right? So we're just now deploying our first 10-unit pilot in late February to actually start collecting real feedback from the product. So we've only really been able to present visualizations and concepts at this point.
Okay, I think.
Wow, that's great.
Great, this is Pip. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're great. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so I think this is a great concept, really, like using the ability to collect samples and learn from it, which is great. And you said about machine learning and deep learning for this. What sort of algorithms do you think you'll go for here? Is this the sort of thing where you'll go for some like outlier detection within patients to see when their sodium levels or other biomarkers change in relation to themselves? Or is it going to be like a kind of classification where you have a big data set that continually learns from people around the world and then classifies those people and then applies those classifications to each individual with every, I don't know, flush, for example?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think we're kind of early in that process. So right now we're just making sure to structure data collection to be able to apply these. And we're looking at deep learning. I think it's going to be more on the side of applying deep learning to pull out things from large amounts of data. So, you know, not guiding where that information, or not guiding what we're specifically looking for, but letting the deep learning pull out the correlations that we wouldn't have otherwise identified. You know, so for example, say we're measuring 50 different biomarkers on somebody every other day or every day. I think that deep learning should be able to pull out new biomarkers from that information that don't yet exist today that could help personalize medicine in a big way.
Yeah, good point. Like a kind of, they're just so very unsupervised in that respect.
Yeah, the unsupervised deep learning.
Right, we got another question here from Bert.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Sure can, go ahead.
Wonderful, thank you. And great presentation. I really like the approach and the concept you've shared with us today. My question is about the authentication of the user. And you mentioned fingerprint, which I can imagine in a bathroom environment may be a talking point. And with your emphasis on AI, I'm wondering, why didn't you use face recognition or something along those lines?
Yeah. Well, one, we don't want to put a camera in the bathroom. We don't think people will support that. And two, the fingerprint scanner was sort of the lowest hanging fruit initially, right? I mean, you have to flush the toilet anyway, so your finger is going to be on the flusher handle the same as
30 seconds
else. But I can't go into too much detail because we're looking at IP around it. But we are looking at ways to use the urine and biomarkers itself, along with some learning and analytics, to automatically identify the user and to get rid of that fingerprint scanner for the biometric identification.
Okay, you got 10 seconds left. I got a quick question if we can do that from David Snyder, who's asking, how does your product transmit data? 5 seconds.
Cellular.
Oh wow, that was answered in 5 seconds. Great. Okay, so that actually gets us to 5 minutes even. Okay, awesome, everyone. Thanks for your fantastic participation. And for our last presentation, thanks, Michael. We've got Priyal, and your 3 minutes start now.
Great, thank you everyone for joining us. I will keep this brief and lightning. So my name is Priyal Sheth. I am the EVP of Client Relations at Medicell, a neuroscience software consultancy. Next slide. We develop and build custom solutions to help share neuroscience data and models online and create compelling visual experiences. Next slide. You can click all the way down to populate the slide. Perfect. Yeah. So we work in web and we build mobile apps. We're used to working in big pharma, so large organizations, and we are neuroscience focused since we have PhD level neuroscience cross training, and the way we work is agile development cycles. Next slide. Some of our customers include Pfizer, Biogen, and some of these universities, top universities around the world. Thank you. Next slide. So I'll be talking about this EEG mobile app. This was actually in conjunction with Red Bull. So specifically what we have here was a production that Red Bull had produced, and they wanted the real-time feedback of folks attending the movie premiere. You had 400 people in LA, 400 people in New York, and each of them, as you can see in the bottom, was attached with a 2-channel EEG headset. And so it was our job to build a mobile app that acquired the signal off of the EEG headsets, sent that data over, and built this real-time visualization to show the audience members their response to the production. Next slide. Great. The next case study I'm going to be talking about is Social Lab. And so Social Lab is a web-based platform for acquiring clinical data on social cognition. It was something that allowed players to play simple game theory versus a human opponent or a bot. The main goal was to study how social cognition is affected in patients of psychiatric disorders. Next slide. And the screenshot we have here is the actual game showing either healthy controls or folks with neurological diseases can play to assess their social cognition. Next slide. So just to review, Metacell, we're a neuroscience software consultancy. We build custom solutions for really any neuroscience data needs, whether that's R&D, on clinical trials, so on and so forth. And we most recently developed our own in-house platform that kind of takes the best in breed of tools at a fraction of the cost. Thank you.
Okay. Wow, amazing. That was just under 10 seconds, under 3 minutes. Great. So fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. A fantastic presentation. So let's go ahead and open up to any questions from anyone on the line.
Well, it's Colleen. Just curious if you could share anything about any work you've done with anxiety or depression.
So the specific examples, once again, would be the Social Lab case study, which was in conjunction with UCL, and it was not specific to anxiety or depression, but I think just like patients that identified having some type of disorder. So there was no classification on that. But we are in talks with a few companies to build mobile apps that will be used as cognitive assessments for specific disease states like anxiety or depression.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Got a question here from Pip, it looks like.
This is Pip. So I'm trying to get my head around it a bit, really. So it seems like you've got like this instantaneously collected data that's feeding into a platform as the data is being collected. Is that correct?
So the way it usually works is, the client will either already have disparate data sets, right? Disparate types of neuroscience data, or they're interested in having an infrastructure set up so that when data is collected, it is integrated and transformed in a way that makes it useful. So it's either case. That's kind of reason why we are a software consultancy, because a lot of the work that we do, there isn't like an off-the-shelf solution, and it requires also understanding the nature of what that specific client is interested in having done.
And is this the sort of thing that could then be applied to that kind of like almost like instant feedback idea that we saw in the previous presentation as well? Like, for example, if you two got together, I'm just saying, I know yours is neuroscience, but I'm just saying, like, can you design something, some kind of like interface that would take data like that, or like clinical trial data, and present it in a way that like really shows people the areas in which their health is falling behind, or think about clinical trial, really highlights the patients who are whose quality of life or something is really improving or declining, like in real time, depending on the needs.
Yeah, I don't see why not. And yeah, to your point, right? It's pulling different types of data. So I know intake, they were doing finger and a few other sensors. I forget the types of data, but yeah, there's no reason why those different data types can't be fed and integrated, and then yes, presented in real time, some type of visualization that makes it very, very simple for the patient to understand, what's
because I think that's kind of one of the barriers we have with all these wearable technologies, is that there's so much going on. We can reduce it down to how much X, Y, or Z has changed in terms of a wearable thing, but if you can put it all together in a way that's accessible to patients or clinicians even, I think that's a really good direction. So maybe working with people like the previous presenters would be a good move.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'd love to take the conversation offline to, explore more of your thoughts on that, Pip.
David Snyder, did you have a question? Okay, Colleen, did you have one?
Yes, just a follow-up to the last comment, wondering how would you be able to avoid bias in a clinical trial setting if you are giving patient feedback along the way? And does this mean that perhaps there's a different way that we measure change given the sort of interactive interface where the patient gets to see results immediately?
1 minute, Priel.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. And so if it's in a clinical trial, I think that would be part of the clinical development or the kind of outline to see if that even makes sense, if that's how they would like to measure or have that kind of bias in. But I think if it's post-regulatory and it's been passed, then a clinician would be able to see that data, and if a patient's able to see that data, if anything, it's going to incentivize them to comply with the agenda that's set forth to them by the physician so that they can get better. So I think that the presentation would not be useful maybe in clinical trials. I'm not sure, that's part of the study design, but I think post approval, it definitely makes sense to kind of change patient behavior.
If I can chip in again, this is
5
Bart
seconds.
Stevens from Q1.6. It depends on what you're measuring in the clinical trial. If it's a validated endpoint, you cannot influence the patients. But if it's around compliancy or in feedback, sometimes this is included in trials.
Okay, thanks, Bart. Sorry about that. We got to end our presentations today. That was incredible, everyone. Thank you so much. So there are some, thanks, guys. So there are some questions still left that we weren't able to get to. I apologize, but I'll try my best to connect everyone afterwards here. So the conversation will still continue at Lightning Speed Crowdsourcing, our channel on Slack. So do feel free to reach out to Bart, Michael, and Priel with any questions that are remaining, or to continue any more questions that were asked. I'm sure our presenters would more than love to continue this lively conversation. So now, if this is something that you think that you would like to, jump into the ring here and ask a question to our community, or pitch a new idea, or show the great things of your new company, reach out to us. This is run by Kat Gold. She's done an excellent job getting everything lined up. So if you have questions, do reach out to her at Kat Cole on Slack, and also through Catherine@dimesociety.org. And that's it for today, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. This was really, really fantastic. Thanks again to all of our
thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Thanks,
Have a
bye.
great day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. And join us at Dime for our next session.